Hi, everyone. I'll be with you in just a couple of minutes. I need to share this out to a few places. Okay, thanks for waiting, everybody. Hi, Jeffrey. And hi, Steve DeVore. Nice to see you two here. Don't think I've seen you before. And Stephen Wolfbrandt. Very nice to see you too, Steve. And Dolores Pierce. Thank you for coming. And Kay, very glad to see you, Kay. Thank you for coming. Kay says, I've traded Matt out for you. I'll laugh out loud. MSNBC sucks anymore. And Jimmy T says, greetings and salutations. Hi, Jimmy T. Nice to see you. And Kay says, hi, Dolores. Steve says, I took a break from the news, although I did look out the window to see if we were still here. Everything looks good here. What's happening by you? Everything's pretty good here, Steve. By Steve DeVore, that is. It was a rainy day, but I'm indoors now. It was a cold and rainy day. They're predicting maybe some ice rain for here, but I'm indoors and I'm warm and I'm comfortable. I got through dinner okay. So here we are. And it's time to get to politics. This is the In Depth Show, and I'm Joe Firestone. And I got to see if I look okay. I guess I look okay, or passably well anyway. I guess I don't think I'm dropping anything right now. My CPU looks like it's way overloaded. I don't know exactly what's causing that. So, how's my sound, by the way, before I proceed? How's my sound doing? Can everybody hear me okay? No echoes today? No extraneous noises? I see my picture's a little frozen. Hmm. Kay says it sounds good. I guess my picture's a little frozen. That will probably get better in a little while. Russ says tiny echo. That's my signal to turn down the volume a bit. Hopefully the tiny echo is now gone. I'll try to figure out where else it could be coming from. Not sure. Stacy Lindaberry. Hi, Stacy. Nice to see you. You thought I was RGB at first. Huh? Okay, so let's go. First, I want to talk about something happening tomorrow, and that is we'll go take a look at it now. And that is an article on common dreams. And the article is entitled, quote, "To Protect Our Democracy," unquote. Tuesday night rallies are planned in all 50 states to demand that Congress votes to impeach Trump. It was written by Julia Conley, staff writer for Common Dreams, and was posted on December 15th. They're planning more than 500 rallies for Tuesday evening. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are expected to call on the U.S. House to vote to impeach President Donald Trump. Rallies would take place at congressional offices and other public spaces. The night before, that's tonight, the House is expected to vote on two articles of impeachment accusing Trump of abusing his power when he pressured the Ukrainian president to investigate former VP Joe Biden and obstructing Congress by stonewalling its investigation. The facts are uncontested, organizers said Saturday, quote unquote. And then, quote again, "An extensive investigation turned up phone records, transcripts, and first-hand witness testimony that proved Trump demanded Ukraine interfere in the 2020 election on his behalf before he'd give them critical military aid or a White House meeting, unquote. Well, I don't think that first-hand witness testimony has exactly surfaced. Do you? But that's another question. Anyway, Americans from California to West Virginia are ready to hold their representatives accountable and declare that no one, not even the president, is above the law, unquote. They added. At least 527 events are planned for 5:30 local time on Tuesday. There's an event here in the DC area. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make that one. But I believe it's going to be at the Capitol. The quote, Nobody's Above the Law coalition, which includes Credo Action, Indivisible, and Public Citizen, reported that more than 100,000 people had RSVP'd to the events. It would be great if they could get 500,000 people all across the country. On Twitter, MoveOn posted a video featuring people who plan to attend the rallies, explaining why they're urging the House to vote to impeach the president. We must impeach and remove Trump because he and his administration are unchecked and unbalanced, quote unquote, said one participant. Quote, he has betrayed the oath he took to protect and defend the Constitution, unquote. Quote, it's on us, the people, to protect our democracy, unquote, said another. Congress, quote again, Congress will only act if the people demand it. So that's a quick one for you on that one. Moving to another article. This one from Truthout. And this one is by Alexis Goldstein, who's a veteran of the Occupy movement, and by now a pretty well-known writer and podcaster. Okay, and Alexis, who I consider very perspicacious, by the way, says, oh, by the way, this was published on December 15th also. And she says, Republicans have made it clear that they've decided to circle the wagons around Trump. They certainly have. This united opposition, combined with the defensive posturing of the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, shows it's almost certain the Senate will not vote to remove Trump. But despite warnings by Republicans to the contrary, impeachment has already hurt Trump. And I think that's an important statement, and I hadn't seen others make that statement. Most of the opinion we see thinks that the impeachment proceedings have been hurting the Democrats and will continue to hurt them, and that all impeachment will do is serve as a distraction from the issues and from the effort to get Trump out through the 2020 election. But going on, and impeachment will continue to hurt Republicans from pausing McConnell's stuffing of the courts, to providing yet more airtime to Trump's crimes, to creating a legacy of impeachment that will tarnish Trump's his political legacy. Republicans have always been desperate to convince the media that impeachment would make Trump stronger. Polling shows the opposite has been true. Actually, most Americans actually oppose impeachment or opposed impeachment prior to the Ukraine scandal snowballing. But since September 28th, shortly after the Ukraine scandal snowballed, more Americans supported impeachment, but then opposed it. As of December 12th, 47.5% of Americans supported impeaching Trump, with 45.8% opposed, according to an aggregation of polls by 538. Nate Silver again. Trump's approval rating has also taken a hit since the impeachment investigation began. On September 24th, the day House Speaker Pelosi announced the impeachment investigation, 538, listed Trump's aggregate approval rating at 43.1%. It's been below that number ever since, and as of December 13th, sits at 41.9%. Now, that statement that he's been losing in the polls is also supported by a poll that appeared today, this morning. It was a national poll, and according to the poll, it reported that Bernie Sanders had a 53-41 lead over Trump. Okay, at this point, and Joe Biden had a 52-40 lead. So both were at 12%. Now they've been leading Trump actually right along, but they haven't been recently at 12%. They're more like 7 or 8. Okay, or at most, at 9. So the new margin at 12% is the kind of margin that they used to have a few months back, and it definitely represents an increase in the relative approval of Sanders and Biden as opposed to Trump. So that tends to reinforce this finding that the aggregate approval of Trump has been falling. But Alexis Goldstein points out that Trump's disapproval rating is double digits higher than former President Bill Clinton's was during the height of the 1998 impeachment uh, 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 investigation. I think that's a very significant observation. After the 1998 Starr report accused Clinton of lying under oath, 36% disapproved of Clinton. Trump's disapproval ratings at a similar point are 17.5% higher. By Ukraine impeachment report, Trump's disapproval sat at 53.5%. Bill Clinton's disapproval rating actually decreased following the Starr report. Clinton's disapproval rating was just 27% on December 29th, 1998, the day the House approved 2 impeachment articles against him. Isn't that rich? His disapproval rating was just 20% at a similar point in time. On December 19th, of 1998, Clinton's disapproval rating was 27%. Trump's disapproval rating is at around 53%. Trump has thus far seen no such support. His disapproval rating has hovered around 53% in the last week and seems likely to remain there through the House vote on impeachment. Forcing the Senate to hold a trial with respect to removal of Trump will temporarily obstruct Mitch McConnell's singular obsession stuffing our courts with young, radically conservative ideologues. As Dave Dian noted in the American Prospect, the likely month-long Senate removal trial will, quote, last 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, leaving far less room for judicial confirmations, unquote. So that's a good result, but we also have to note it's going to leave far less room for the discussion, okay, of any issues or passing any legislation. But to be fair, they're not going to be passing any legislation in the Senate anyway this coming year, I think. If they do pass any, it's going to be bad news for the rest of us. Anyway, McConnell has been driving the Senate to confirm judges at a breakneck pace. Okay, so a Politico reporter noted that Obama confirmed 55 circuit judges in 8 years, while Trump has confirmed 50 in just 3. And Mitch McConnell is trying to get even more done before the end of next year, with 18 judicial nominations planned for this week. McConnell has been so successful in part because he reduced the Senate debate time on judges from 30 hours per nominee to just 2. Very many of the nominations were vacant in the first place because the prior chair of the Senate, the Judiciary Committee, Patrick Leahy, honored a tradition known as, quote, blue slips, unquote, which allowed a senator from the same state as the nominated judge to shut down the process if they wished. The Republicans have extended the Democrats no such courtesy, and now Trump has confirmed over 170 judges. That is, of course, tremendously damaging because, in large part, he's confirmed people who are competent and also extremely conservative. Many of them come out of the Federalist Society and have been trained in their brand of judicial doctrine. Anyway, the Senate trial will put a pause on these nominations, and as Dave Dayen points out, Senator McConnell may want to draw the trial out in order to hurt the 5 senators running in the Democratic primary, as they will have to be present for the trial and not out on the campaign trail. But the longer the trial lasts, the less time that Mitch McConnell has, and the fewer judges he can jam through. It's no longer going to hurt 5 senators, it seems, because there are some more of them that are dropping out. As far as the senators who are going to be on the debate stage are concerned, it will hurt only 3. That's Bernie Sanders, Senator Warren, and Senator Klobuchar. She is still running from the Senate and is still going to be in the debate. So, the trial in the Senate also presents the Democrats with a massive opportunity to further tell the story of Trump's crimes. The Democrats will be able to make their case throughout the weeks of the trial, calling witnesses and arguing that Trump committed obstruction of justice and abuse of power. This will inflict further pain on the Republican senators who are facing difficult contests in 2020, but for re-election. Arizona Senator Martha McSally is trailing her Democratic component, the astronaut Mark Kelly, husband of former Representative Gabrielle Giffords. Kelly led McSally 47 to 44%. In a poll of likely voters in Arizona conducted December 3rd through 4th, and Republican Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado also faces a re-election battle that's very tough there. December 4th poll from Keating Research showed only 33% of Colorado voters have a favorable view of Gardner, compared to 45% who have an unfavorable view, so he's negative by 12. His favorability rating in Colorado is even lower than Trump's, who is rated favorably by only 37% of Colorado voters. And Maine Senator Susan Collins still hasn't publicly said whether she's running for re-election or not, but if she does, there is a $3.8 million pot of money waiting for whoever is successful in the primary, thanks to her support for Brett Kavanaugh. Supporting Trump in the Senate trial will come at a real cost to these three Republican senators. Of course, that's not enough to swing the Senate. It's just enough to bring things down to 51 to 49. But there are other Republican senators who are running too, or there are other vacant seats as well. So getting those three seats for the Democrats certainly would give them a leg up on taking over the majority in the Senate. Anyway, but the impact of impeachment will be felt well past the 2020 elections. No one knows this better than Hillary Clinton, who came to the 2016 election as a candidate with immense baggage, in part because of the legacy of Bill Clinton's impeachment. Hillary herself has implicitly acknowledged this, describing the ire on the right directed against the Clintons as a, quote, vast right-wing conspiracy, unquote, that was, quote again, even better funded in 2016. Justified or not, the endurance of the hatred against the Clintons writ large cannot be understated. Quote, what about Clinton, unquote, became a common refrain among conservatives in the media in the 2016 election, following the Access Hollywood tape showing Trump bragging about sexual assault. The refrain continued through the Kavanaugh nomination. Trump has more potential heirs than Bill Clinton did in 1998 with his children, Ivanka and Eric and Don Jr., and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, all showing their immense appetite for political power. Thus, there are more people to be tarnished in the wave of sentiment that will inevitably flow for the same number of decades that it has chased the Clintons. So, while McConnell's recent statements that he's coordinating with White House lawyers makes a fair trial seem impossible, the political pain will still be felt by Trump and the GOP, and he knows it, which is probably why Trump has been retweeting his supporters at a record pace in the last week. On December 8th, Trump tweeted or retweeted 105 times, but he topped that on December 12th with 123 tweets, which was more than former President Obama sent on the at POTUS account for an entire year. In addition to the pause in the Republican takeover of the courts, Trump's approval ratings will likely fall further as the scandal continues to dominate the headlines. Senators in purple states could withdraw support for Trump as they see the effect on the poll numbers. With the lasting stain that impeachment would have on his legacy, Trump could be paying a price for a long time to come. So that's a point of view I haven't seen before. I think that Goldstein's analysis is just something that hasn't appeared. All we've been hearing from the left when it comes to impeachment is actually doom and gloom. In other words, not only having those who are extremely progressive, such as Alexis Goldstein, uh, actually been opposed to impeachment, but they've also been convinced that thus far the efforts to impeach Trump have been a distraction and have been bad news for Democrats. And you can find that opinion stated uh, uh, at many progressive blogs, okay, at this point in time. Now, I don't know. I think it may be too early to say, but if the polls continue to proceed in the direction that Ms. Goldstein, okay, has indicated in this post, if we continue to see a this a substantial increase in the disapproval rating, okay, of Donald Trump, uh, then clearly this is going to hurt him, and it's going to hurt him with the Republicans, in particular, because more of them will become extremely fearful of their fate, and some of them may not even run. If over the next 2 3 weeks we get uh, a continuous decrease, okay, in Trump's approval rating as this goes on, then it's possible that Susan Collins, who has not announced whether she's running for re-election, may simply decide that uh, she doesn't really have a great chance to win. And Sarah Gideon, who's running as her chief opposition in Maine, Sarah Gideon is an establishment Democrat who, however, is on the progressive side. But she was the leader of the Democrats in the state legislature, okay, in Maine, and she's a fairly articulate person who seems to be fairly progressive, I would say, but certainly to the left of the senators in, say, New Hampshire right now. Uh, she could be a very attractive candidate. She's raised already considerable money, and with that pot of 3.8 million possibly waiting for her, she can expect to be well funded. Now, clearly, Susan Collins will be able to meet her funding in Maine, but in previous contests that she's been in, Susan Collins has not had to face a Democrat who is just as well funded as she is. This would be the first time, and the anger over Kavanaugh is still great, okay, in Maine. So if things continue to go badly for the approval ratings, okay, of Trump, and the difference between his approval, okay, and his disapproval ratings, then Susan Collins may feel that it's simply best for her to retire. Uh, so I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that. and then the Republicans would, simply lose a seat by default, almost, because they have no one who would be able to replace her and be competitive with Sarah Gideon. Okay, in my view. So, uh, okay, so you can take this all with a grain of salt, but also Cory Gardner looks very weak, okay, in Colorado, and Martha McSally looks very weak in Arizona, okay, as well. Because she looks weak now, and with Trump continuing to weaken her, it won't be long before Mark Kelly has a lead of 5 to 6 points, which means he's very likely to win that race. As an astronaut, um, he's relatively non-political, and he's kind of centrist. He seems to suit the politics, okay, of Arizona as those politics exist, okay, at this point. He's an attractive candidate. He's articulate. He's intelligent, and of course, he will get a sympathy vote. I think a substantial sympathy vote. So let us leave it there. There's evidently a case to be made that the impeachment is hurting Trump. And while I recognize the validity of the point of view that uh, by going for an impeachment, and certainly this very narrow impeachment, may be creating trouble for the Democrats in 2020, okay, if it gets to the election of 2020. It also seems to me that if the process in any way can hamstring Trump, that would be a very good thing because every day he's in the presidency, he does worse and worse things. It's just outrageous. I can't even name all the outrageous things that he has done. So the quicker we can get him out, the better. So I think impeachment continues to be important. I recognize the other side of the argument that it may hurt the contest, the primary contest. It could end up actually hurting Bernie Sanders, okay, and Elizabeth Warren, simply because they would have to be inactive for the whole month, okay, of January, okay, or essentially stuck in Washington while the Iowa campaign actually goes on. On the other hand, they both have very good campaign organizations, okay, in Iowa, and they may be able to address their campaigns from Washington at a distance and have their proxies do the on the ground work for them. There's some pretty impressive proxies who can help. Okay, for example, Ro Khanna, also Nina Turner. Uh, there are people who can do a pretty good job in one-on-one town hall settings, okay, in Iowa. And Bernie isn't finished campaigning there yet. He's going to be campaigning hard, okay, for the rest of this month. So he may still be able to build, okay, enough of a lead to head off competition coming from people who are active there, okay, in January, while he is hamstrung in the Senate. All this, however, remains to be seen, and I'm going to leave this article now and talk about something which is certainly on the negative side of impeachment. So let me pull that up for you. This one is called, okay, this one appeared in the American Prospect. It's called On the Cover of Impeachment. The Nancy Pelosi wraps up a year's policymaking in 24 hours. This is so important, this one. While nobody was looking, the House Speaker resolved uh, some very major end of the year policy deals. Here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this was written by actually by Dave Dayen, who is the editor in chief, okay, at the American Prospect, by Right Now, and one of its best writers, okay, as well. He's someone who I think is he's going to eventually be a giant of journalism, okay, if he is not, okay, if he hasn't gotten there quite yet. He's a tremendous journalist. So, in the climactic scene of The Godfather, Michael Corleone attends the baptism of his sister Connie's baby as his henchmen uh, slaughter all the heads of New York's five families, as they ritually slaughter all the heads of New York's five families. Corleone tightened his control over organized crime while standing in church quietly renouncing Satan. On Tuesday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi pulled off the Corleone strategy. She used the introduction of articles of impeachment, the baptism, as cover to secure major deals on trade, drug prices, immigration, and defense, all on the same day and at the same time. While those not distracted by the holidays, fixated on the impeachment drama, Nancy Pelosi settled the fights that were raging among the Democratic caucus all year. And though progressives didn't get completely rolled, there are consequences to the Pelosi blitz that will reverberate in the 2020 elections and for decades into the future. Let's start with a successful power play from the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the CPC, who forced her to the negotiating table and won a couple of long sought changes to her top uh, uh, to her priority, her top one, the Lower Drug Costs Now Act. That probably matters far more than the substance of the compromise, especially since this bill is going nowhere fast in the Senate. But Pelosi was content and, in fact, was gleeful to ignore the CPC co-chairs uh, who um, um, who are actually Pramila Jayapal and Mark and Mark Pocan. She believed she could muscle the bill through and crush the rebellion the same way she froze out the progressives all year on drug prices. Jayapal and Pocan, who were ridiculed by anonymous Pelosi aides, remained firm, finding the votes necessary to tank the bill and leveraging that into a negotiation. That means something for the future. It means, okay, that the progressives must be respected in policy making. Quote, this is a huge win, and it shows what we can do when we stick together and all push hard for the American people, unquote, said Jayapal in a statement that was made to the Prospect. All that said, even the CPC statement acknowledges, quote, we didn't get everything we wanted, unquote. The CPC had four priorities going in. Ensure that ensure ensure that the negotiated price is applied to the uninsured. Strike the non-interference clause that bans government price negotiations with drug companies. Increase the number of drugs negotiated every year, and restore the Jayapal amendment that caps annual drug price spikes at the rate of inflation in the employer-sponsored plans serving 150 million people. Though the amendment had passed the House Education and Labor Committee, Nancy watered it down to a study, a common technique to kill a policy. Incredibly, in a Dear Colleague letter on Monday, Pelosi took credit for including the study. So, but in the end, the progressives got 2 out of 4 under the bill. Under the bill, the government would still negotiate a minimum of 25 drugs in year one, but that would double to 50 in year two and stay constant thereafter. This was a priority for uh, uh, about 4 congressmen, but for Congressman Pocan. And the Jayapal Amendment did get restored in an even stronger fashion when it passed the Education Labor Committee. But help for the uninsured did not come. Last Friday, I quoted Nicole Smith Holt, whose uninsured son died from lack of access to insulin. The bill, quote, wouldn't have saved his life, unquote, Smith Holt Bill told me. It still won't. Of course, the bill won't save anyone's life because it's not going to become law. This was a messaging bill, strengthened somewhat by CPC leaders who communicated to Pelosi they wouldn't be ignored and had to be reckoned with. That alone improves the future for the priorities of the progressives. Okay, I think it does, but I need to make an editorial comment here. Uh, I think it was a huge error for the progressives to compromise when Nancy Pelosi was up for the speakership at the beginning of 2019. Okay, I think the progressives should have been much more aggressive in fighting her election. If they had joined with the conservatives, okay, who opposed her, I think it would have been possible to deny her the speakership at that time. Of course, they would have had to have compromised. I shouldn't say. They would have had to have worked with people they dislike, the centrists, okay, in the party, the right wing Democrats. Okay, but I think they should have done that to block her, and then fought with the centrists over who her successor would be. In that situation, uh, I think they stood a chance of electing Barbara Lee to the position. I think they stood a chance. I don't think it was a sure thing, okay, at all, um, uh, uh, because the whole caucus may still have turned to someone who was a faux aggressive and gotten them into the situation. But on the other hand, they might not have been as skillful, okay, as Nancy Pelosi is, in passing the negative things, and maybe a little more negativism was necessary for the Democrats in this particular term, okay, of Congress. They've been far too collaborative with the president, for my blood. Anyway, going further. The other three bills cemented on Tuesday all will likely become law, all with bipartisan votes. So, bipartisan votes, folks, keep your hand in your pocket because they're going to try and pick it. Pelosi got AFL CIO President Rich Trumka to sign off on the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement and USMCA, handing Trump a political victory on one of his signature issues. Terrible, terrible strategy. Terrible strategy. They should have stopped Trump cold on this. Anyway, predictably, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham gushed immediately, calling USCMA, quote, the biggest and best trade agreement in the history of the world, unquote. It's not that. Economically, the USMCA is a nothing burger. Even the most rose colored analysis with doubtful assumptions built in shows GDP growth of only 0.06% per year. Uh, 0.0, it's not 0.06, which would have been almost 1%. It's 0.06%. So it's 0.0006, 0.006 improvement with doubtful assumptions. There's one good provision, the elimination of the investor state dispute settlement, the ISDS provision that allowed corporations to sue governments in secret by tribunals over trade violations. There's one bad provision, the extension of the legal immunity for tech platforms over user generated content put into a trade deal for the first time. This will make the immunity shield codified in Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act much harder to alter in the future. Nancy Pelosi has called this deal a template for future agreements, though trade reformers have called it a bare minimum floor. Nancy Pelosi tried to remove the immunity shield but abandoned the request. She did succeed in removing a provision for Big Pharma that extended exclusivity periods for biologics. That's good. The Sierra Club has termed the deal an environmental failure, quote unquote, that will not have binding standards on clear air and water or climate goals. But the threshold question on the USMCE is always going to be labor enforcement. Will the labor laws imposed on Mexico hold, improving their lot while giving the other manufacturing workers of the U.S. a chance to compete? There was also the open question of why the U.S. would reward Mexico with a trade deal update when trade unionists in the country continued to be kidnapped and killed. In his statement, Trump, whom I consider a total sellout, lauds the labor enforcement, noting provisions that make it easier to prove any violations, including violence against workers, the rules of evidence for disputes, and inspections, okay, of Mexican facilities, a key win. But I've been told that the AFL-CIO did not see the details of the text before signing off, which is unforgivable, especially on trade where details matter. There was no vote, but there was no vote by union leaders, just a briefing from the AFL-CIO. At least one union, the Machinist Union, remains opposed, and others were non-committal until they see the texts. The Economic Policy Institute, which is strongly tied to labor, called the agreement weak tea at best, a tiny advance on the status quo that will not reverse decades of outsourcing of U.S. jobs. So why did Trumka, who Pelosi gave the ability to approve or reject the MCA, decide to support it? Labor has felt self-imposed pressure to say yes to a trade deal, to counter the Chamber of Commerce's claims that they're purely contrarian. Oh, God, these people, so incredible. Trumka may have seen this as minimally harmful and a good way to rebut to the charge. I mean, they're playing PR games instead of blocking the trade deal and denying Trump a victory. They're playing PR games. These people do not know how to go for the throat. They don't know. Plus, the minority of Labor's rank and file supports Trump, another cross pressure that may have been a factor. Yeah, there is a minority. It is significant. But guess what? They're going to support Trump anyway. They're going to support Trump anyway. So why say yes to the trade deal? It only makes them more likely to support Trump. I mean, the trade deal does nothing for labor. While the economics are negligible and potentially harmful on tech policy, on the politics, activists are losing their mind at the prospect of a Trump signing ceremony. Yeah, me too. With labor by his side on a deal that he will construe as keeping promises to Midwest voters. Quote, any corporate Democrat who pushed to get this agreement passed and thinks Donald Trump is going to share the credit for those improvements is dangerously gullible, said Yvette Simpson, CEO of Democracy for America, in a statement. Only a small handful of Democratic centrists were pushing for a USMCA vote, based mostly on the idea that they had to, quote, do something, unquote, to show they could get things done in Congress. Yeah, small handful of Democratic centrists, people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Now they've got it, and they'll have to live with the consequences. That says Dave Dayen. The USMCA and the drug bill weren't the only items Pelosi ticked off on Tuesday. The National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, a perennial passed every year that always includes a vast amount of policymaking, got through a House-Senate Conference Committee with a floor vote imminent. Now that, of course, is a dreadful bill. That's the $738 billion authorization bill for the military, which Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders have called a bill of astonishing moral cowardice, quote unquote. Senator Warren came out in opposition as well. Earlier versions included bipartisan bans on using funds for war with Iran or continuing to support the war in by Yemen. Both of those were stripped out. Now, there was another measure that regulated toxic by PFAS chemicals as a hazardous substance by drinking water. That was passed in the House with a unanimous vote, and that also got killed. Got killed through Nancy Pelosi's negotiations with the Trumpists. Nancy Pelosi chalked that up to, quote, Senate GOP obstruction in a statement, while touting the addition of paid family leave for government employees and the end of the so-called widow's tax, quote unquote, for military spouses. There's one other big win on military procurement, okay, as the negotiators kept in an amendment that will allow contracting officers to demand certified cost information for parts and equipment they purchase. This will better ensure their reasonable prices by giving the government the data it needs to prevent the kinds of rip-offs we've seen from defense contractors like TransDigm, which, according to a February Inspector General report, received excessive profits with markups up to 4,451% on nearly all the products it sold to the government. What the hell is going on here? Pelosi also moved forward on a controversial farm workers bill, which will get a floor vote this week. As David Bacon explained for The Prospect, the bill provides a pathway to legal residency for undocumented farm workers, but maintains and expands guest worker programs that cut down on pay. Daniel Costa of the Economic Policy Institute explains that the bill would codify a Trump administration rule that would force downward wage rates for a majority of the migrant guest workers. It's kind of a devil's bargain. Legal status for some in exchange for lower wages for many. This spray of end of year legislation comes while the political world is focused in a monomaniacal way on impeachment. The first question Pelosi got at her press conference on USMCA was whether it was a coincidence that the deal timing overlapped with the impeachment articles. Quote, it's just as we get to the end of a session, there have to be decisions made, unquote, she said. That's certainly what happened. And if Trump is reelected, if big tech continues to evade accountability, if imperial adventures continue abroad, if migrant farm workers cannot feed their families, you can trace it back to this Tuesday and the actions a House Speaker took while nobody was paying attention, unquote. That was written on December 11, 2009 at 10:13 a.m. And of course, I entirely agree with the thrust and the tenor of that article. That article shows in brief and in graphic detail what damage was done when, at the beginning of the Congress, some of the progressives and the caucus in general made compromises, with Nancy Pelosi as the price for their support. They bargained for seats on key committees in return for their support of her for Speaker. And she kept her word on getting onto the key committees, but she knew where the real power lay. And the real power lay with the speakership. And if the progressives wanted to stop the kinds of bad deals that she did here in caving into the Republicans, what they had to do was to prevent her from becoming Speaker in the first place. And my view of this is, under no conditions should they agree to her continuing as Speaker, continuing as Speaker in 2000, okay, and by 21. I think the Democrats are almost sure to retain the House of Representatives at this point, but whether Bernie Sanders wins, okay, or does not win, it's absolutely imperative for Nancy Pelosi to go. She will be a big barrier to anything he wants to do. Her presence is not a welcome one from the point of view of having progressive policies passed. We have to do whatever we can, okay, to get rid of her, including supporting Shahed, Shahed Buttar, who is running in the primary in California against her, and who I think has a decent chance to beat her for the nomination of the Democratic Party for that particular seat, thereby ending her career and making it a very, very small likelihood that she'll be able to become the Speaker again. It is theoretically possible for the Speaker to be someone who is not a member of the House. Okay. But I think there would not be much sentiment for appointing her at that point if she lost her election. I think the sentiment would be then for her to retire with dignity, to say goodbye, and people would be celebrating all of her various accomplishments while she was the leader, okay, of the Democratic Party and the Speaker of the House twice, and simply leave it at that. Uh, it would be great for the Democrats if she would finally go. She should have gone long ago. The amount of damage that she did to the Democrats in the period 2009, 2010, and 2007, 2008. And during this session, and in between, when she bargained away all kinds of good things because she compromised with the Republicans too easily because something had to get done. Something had to get done. Sick and tired of hearing that something has to get done. What has to get done are good things, not something, not just anything. That's the excuse for people who take the donor money, like her. She's Miss Donor herself. Okay, here's another from the American Prospect. Actually, I don't think I'm going to go through this today. I keep trying to get there, but we're at about an hour and 10 minutes now since I've gone on. So I think that's enough time. We'll go into a number of other Green New Deal topics when I'm on again tomorrow night, okay, at 9. For now, I want to see what you have to say. But first, I want to remind you to please share, like, and subscribe my YouTube. Okay, when it goes up, which will be probably within 15 to 20 minutes after this show ends. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Thank you for whatever help that you can actually provide for my efforts here. I certainly do appreciate it. So now, let me see what you have had to say. So Alan Scott has joined. Jimmy T, it's a sound. It's a sound loop. My microphone and speaker's proximity. Am I too close to the microphone, Jimmy? That could be a useful tip. Alan Scott has joined, and Jimmy T says, from San Francisco to Standing Rock to Seattle, and Fielder's journey as a native protector has now come full circle back to San Francisco, where she's running for the local state Senate seats. Okay, Liz Netherland is here. Russ Goldman is here. Steve says, as Stephen DeVore says, I think the impeachment hurts the Republicans more by them circling their wagons around Trump. Tells me they will do anything for money. It doesn't matter if it's being made either legally, okay, or ethically. I think that's a point, actually, Steve. I do think that's a point. And they're doing even worse than that. They're admitting that they're not going to sit as jurors with an open mind. They're saying they're going to be jurors who have already made up their mind. And the chief among them, okay, the majority leader, is saying he's going to be coordinating with the defense. He's going to be coordinating with the White House every step of the way of the impeachment. So the majority leader, the Senate, is not even going to pretend to be neutral, okay, in this case, and to have an open mind. He's going to be the defense attorney. That is unprecedented in impeachment history. He says, the GOP SCOTUS editions are worrying me a lot. Screws us for so many years to come. We need to try to teach our own kids about civics at home, but they don't get that in any schools anymore. It doesn't have to screw us for so many years to come. There are things to do. For example, many of these additions that have been hastily installed and with a clear political bias could be impeached. Of course, that would be extremely conflictful. But if we get a House that is progressive enough and wants to see progressive programs get through, that it will take whatever action is actually necessary. If that action involves the impeachment of a good many of these justices who are obviously biased and who cannot be trusted to uphold the Constitution, then I think that's fair game. I certainly think, okay, that additions to the appeals courts, increasing them in size in order to neutralize, okay, the justices that are passed, also fair game. Just appoint some more justices to cancel their influence out. In other words, pack the courts. At the circuit level, and pack the Supreme Court too. Jeff Ginter's joined. My brother Hal Firestone has joined. Hey Hal, how you doing? And Randy Hedgebeth has joined. Okay, Clark Ryan says we need public banks everywhere. Yes, we do need a network of public banks in the United States, as I often say. And Kay says AOC will fill in for Bernie too. And maybe Rashida, okay, and Ilhan Omar as well. Kay says, do any of you watch or listen to the Tom Hartman show from noon until 3 p.m. on Free Speech TV? If not, okay, you should check it out. Yes, I occasionally watch and listen to Tom Hartman. I value his opinions and his analysis. Uh, I've been watching Tom Hartman for years. Kay says Trumka sucks anyhow. Kay says Northeast Ohio manufacturing sucks badly and has for years since the first NAFTA. People in the Youngstown area are going broke and get no help from anyone. They will get help from Bernie. They will not just help with respect to bringing back some of the manufacturing, but help with respect to new manufacturing in the rural areas and in the rundown urban areas, okay, like the Youngstown area, and new green jobs. New green jobs. All you have to do is look at Bernie's agenda, and you can see that there's going to be an awakening in these towns. Things are going to change. Kay says Nancy Pelosi needs to go. She has a progressive challenger, and I hope he wins. Yeah, Shahed. By Shahed Buttar. Susan Eldridge has joined, and my camera went south for a minute. I don't know why, but looks like it's okay now. Flashed on again. Any other comments or questions? Kay says, yes, Bernie is our answer. Well, not just Bernie. We have to get him the Congress he needs. He needs a Congress that's going to work with him and that's going to support him and that's going to vote through his agenda. We all need that. And I want to give advice to everyone here. Whatever your age, you need to look, okay, at Bernie's program and look seriously at it and ask yourself the question, what will passage of this program mean for me financially? I want you to look at the program not simply from the standpoint of the good it's going to do for everybody and the good it's going to do for our country. Yes, that perspective is very, very important, and you need to consider that as well. But I'm convinced that if you look at his platform from a self interest point of view, from a self interest point of view, and you try to carefully calculate what kinds of benefits you personally will get out of the program, I think that the vast majority of you will come to realize that the program, my feed is obviously unsteady, my camera feed, I don't know why that's true. But anyway, I think that you will come to realize that many thousands of dollars ride for you ride on your getting Bernie and a friendly Congress elected. Dollars for you. Sheer profit that you will make as a result of is passing his platform. There are countless small communities in our country, small cities, the rural areas in our country, the agricultural sector. But I don't mean so much the large farmers, but the small family farmers. There are many of them that will be saved by Bernie's programs. So many people are going to benefit on the economic side, okay, from Bernie, that it's something for people to take seriously and for people to consider and for people to calculate, okay, and to estimate. And that's especially true with respect to getting people who are over 65 who are not now for Bernie, but who are the lowest supporting sector actually for him. This makes no sense to me at all, because from the standpoint of making economic sense for seniors, Bernie's platform is by far the best of all the platforms. This has to be made clear to seniors because they don't realize that this is true. That I've done the calculations for myself, and I can tell you that my net gain, if Bernie were to be able to pass his whole agenda, is likely to be something like $25,295 per year. I've forgotten the precise figure. Okay, I can look it up again. Okay, actually, that's the gain for Bonnie and myself as a couple. Okay, not just for me. But there are many other seniors that are in our position, and they would get those kinds of gains as well. Boomers need to support Bernie big time, and boomers are not supporting Bernie big time right now. They're supporting Biden, which is the worst possible, well, it's not the worst possible decision they could make. Would be worse if they went to Buttigieg, I suppose. Would be worse if they went to Klobuchar, who, when it comes to economics, is an absolute idiot. But or they could vote for Bloomberg, which would be awful. I'm not actually prepared to be so negative about Tom Steyer. I sort of think Tom Steyer has a heart somewhere. Anyway, I think it's time for me to say goodnight. So, okay, I remind you again to please share, like, and subscribe. And please go to my Patreon account, which is at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. And Russ says Joe Biden would take either Buttigieg or Klobuchar as his VP. Yeah, or maybe Harris. Okay, maybe Harris. I mean, Harris would, he'd probably figure Harris would be perfect for him. I know they had a fight, okay, in one of the debates, but that doesn't count for anything. He would want to win, so he'd probably want to run with somebody who is stronger when it comes to identity politics, and that's probably Harris. Kay says, I shared your cast to Boomers for Bernie Hope it helps you, Joe. And thank you, Kay. If you can share the other casts where I actually went through the calculations that can help the senior boomers, I think that would be a big help to Bernie. It would not only be a help to me, but it would be a help to Bernie. That would be very useful, Kay. Okay, if you contact me afterwards, I'll find you the YouTube link for that because it's up on YouTube now, as well as, of course, on Facebook. It's in both places. Anyway, I'll say good night. See you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night.